Hi there, I have just more or less finished a new iteration of my smart optic design, and I thought it might be a bit better to kind of show it off as a complete unit next to the old design and kind of get a bit of a sense of scale, a bit of a feel for why it's as huge as it is and everything like that. I'm going to have the sights hooked up to a battery under the bench here. Run them both off of the same cable here. And so here is my original smart riding and counting optic. I will get some nice close-ups of it in a sec. Basically, this uses EOTech, not reproduction lenses for the front and rear, LCD with its built-in backlight for the under-screen display, and reflects the mirrors into the line of sight of what you're looking at as you're looking at the sight. The trouble with this design is that because you've got a partially reflective first mirror and a partially reflective second mirror, and it's got to bounce off the first mirror and the second mirror and then be returned back to and then pass through the tinted glass as well, you end up with quite a dim image even at maximum brightness. And so that's kind of partly what this sight was developed to experiment with, and also was for someone who specifically wanted a much more much less compact sight to kind of scale up better for his LMG. So the core of what I was redeveloping here was in fact this. The idea is that this would be my new core for any site I want to design. It's a little larger than the existing site, but comes with some significant advantages. Namely, it has space for cob LED array backlight for the display. So this will just about, it does fit this one. This isn't the LED I ended up using. I went for a different voltage, but fits in like that. It's got space for the heatsink around it, and that is currently what is inside here. It also, compared to this board, which has the main board in here with the display this way, kind of all tucked up inside, it flips everything upside down. So the main board is now upside down here, which, an important change for me personally, enables plugging in of the cables from the outside of the site underneath here. This is an improvement. I did manage to prevent the cables from coming out, but it means that if you ever need to change connector or the cables get pulled loose or anything inside the site, you kind of have to remove this whole back plate off the site, take it out, and take the board out, plug the cables back in, and put everything back in. That's all just risk to buttons and losing pieces and all of that. It's just needless faff that, honestly, it should have probably done it from this way around from the start. We'll need a slight software update to fix the fact that now the compass is going to be pointing the wrong direction, but nothing more than that should be needed. So this is the original one. This one has direct press buttons that are kind of free floating. They work quite well. The power button doesn't work the best. I'm probably going to integrate part of what I did for what I was planning to do for the power button for this one into it. This one actually does not have a power button per se. It's all going to be kind of blocked off or not used, because instead the board remains on and you just control the brightness of the backlight, because on this unit, as I said, the backlight is directly illuminated by the LED under here. So if you want the device off, you just turn the backlight off. So one of the other key problems with this sight as a design is, in order to be compact, the front lens is of a similar size to the display, which I don't have an example of. One second. Actually. So that's the size of the display, and as you can see, it's of a kind of similar size to the primary reflector. A bit shorter, but it is the same width, or just a bit bigger, which means that in order to be able to see the entire reflection of what's on this display, you have to be about the same distance as the display is away from the mirror. Which means that since the display is right underneath here, you have to put it right up to your eye, about here, in order to see the whole image. Now that's not very comfortable and natural for most guns. A lot of guns don't even have rails that go back that far. So that's an area that is kind of a design limitation of something this small. And size was a big consideration for this site. I wanted to make sure it was compact, The guns I personally would use this on is my Evo. It's an SMG. I don't want something big and chunky hanging off of it. Tried that with some of my early prototypes. Did not look even remotely sensible. This is a very good scale for it, but it comes with some of those downsides. So this unit is not meant to be like a refinement. I bought this mirror from a site off AliExpress as one of the first ones before I bought an EOTech. No, I did have an EOTech, but I was looking for something a bit bigger. And I thought, 75mm, that's not unreasonable. It's very unreasonable. It is an absolutely enormous mirror. And it just sat around for a bit until one of the guys who was wanting to purchase one of my sites said, hey, can you do one a bit bigger for my LMG? I was like, got the mirrors, don't see why not. I thought it would be as simple as a case of just redesign the housing for this one and off to the races. It was not that. I put in a lot more work into this than I really needed to and added a bunch of features, namely the external backlight, that were not really part of the original spec, but this gave me an excuse to experiment with a process that I wouldn't otherwise have done, which may mean that this eventually migrates down into the smaller sites. Part of the reason I designed this as a core design, as opposed to the integrated design of this one, is it's a bit less efficient on space, but this holds all of the important parts of this site. So the board goes in like this, into the side here, slots in like that. The screen gets held in here. If I didn't have this backlight, I could make the whole thing thinner, of course, but since I do, and then it's got power conversion for the LED, because the LEDs, the unit I ended up using runs off 35 volt max, and the power coming in is of course going to be like 11 volts or whatever you run your gun on. And this whole unit just holds everything I need for the gun. So it holds a much more logical windage adjustment on this unit. You must adjust this side and this side kind of together in order to move. So you adjust them both in the same direction to move it up and down, adjust them in opposite direction to move them left and right, which was a very finicky thing to try and zero, and basically ended up being more trial and error. It was like, fiddle with it, fire BB, see if it goes in the right direction. If it doesn't, fiddle with it again and see what happens. You can't really tune it, as it were. And so part of that was the design of wanting to split that up. This system is ridiculously space efficient because there is nothing underneath the display. Like, there's a millimeter of plastic and then it's the main board, and there's nothing that goes underneath these rails here. In terms of depth, it means that the sight can be really low to the rail. Like, a fair bit of the volume of this here is depth enough for my zeroing my left right zeroing adjustment. I've probably got some parts I can show for that. Yeah, here's an old example of that. Basically, this one's a bit short. I lengthened it for better leverage, but this bit goes into there, and then you've got a bolt that will adjust that, and this whole carriage will move then left to right to adjust the left-right position of the lens. So that's basically the idea. I was redesigning this so that I could then develop any other sight based off of this. They'll all be of more or less the same length. I might make them longer, or if I don't have the custom LED, I might make them shorter and a bit thinner, but functionally they're all just going to be this core with then whatever lenses size I put on them over top. Makes adapting it into a new sight a lot easier. It's just kind of bolted on minor modifications, whereas this, I basically had to strip this back to nothing. I took the board that I used to design this and built it up from scratch again. It was just, there's too much integrated into itself with little bits and things to solve problems and small modifications to make this work, to be able to kind of work it into a different design. So that brings us on to this unit. So still waiting for some buttons. They're currently on the printer right now, and the rail clamp. This is actually clear of the rails. It's literally just above flush with them. And that's there just to keep the LED cool. Basically, the original LED that comes in the display is about 0.1 odd watts. It's edge lit, which means it's nice and even, and the colours are correct. This is direct illumination with a cob array LED, which is circuit on board LEDs. Basically, they're LEDs that are kind of built into a circuit board as opposed to discrete components that are soldered onto it. And as a result, they can be packed closer and built as this integrated unit, which means that you can direct illuminate a display. They're not anything like new bleeding edge tech like mini LED or anything like that, but they work in a similar. They allow me to make an LCD that works in a similar way. So I just rip off the old backlight, and then in this slot here, I have it's technically a Fresnel lens, but I scratched up one side of it and put one of the distribution films to kind of merge things in a certain axis. They're designed for blending the lines of the edge-lit display into a kind of even light. But in this case, I used them to blend between the rows of LEDs on the display. I don't think the fact that it's a Fresnel lens is doing anything. It's one of the old lenses that I prototyped my sight with way back. It just was a convenient piece of 2mm by 25mm square plastic that I could experiment with. It seems to work really well. It gives a nice even light, relatively speaking. You do get a bit of coloured fringing on it, but honestly, it's barely noticeable at this point. And yeah, so it shines from the LED up through this kind of distribution piece that spreads the light out, gives a light, basically glows with the light of the LED, which then shines through the LCD. And that enables this to be monstrously more bright. The sight itself, the electronics of the sight itself, I've spliced in. Sorry about that. Camera went to sleep. I'm not used to doing long format stuff with this camera. It's a bit old and rubbish. So yeah. Oh yeah. Voltages. Basically, yeah. Power comes in from the main power from the gun. Goes straight into this board, which then takes it from the 11.1 volts or equivalent that the board that your battery puts in, and boosts it up to the voltage of the LED. Now, the LED's operating voltage is 30 to 35 volts, supposedly. But I found that anything over about 28, 29 volts, and it would overwhelm my passive cooling. Now, I could put a fan into it. I do have enough, maybe, space with this in here. I could shift the board around a bit. Maybe I could get a very small pancake radial fan to fit in this space here. Sorry about that again. Turns out I found out the reason that I stopped recording. It was because my memory card was full and I didn't check it before I started. So where was I? Oh yes, so the power comes in from the main battery cable, goes through the boost converter, which will take it up to, I chose 28 volts basically, because I don't have a current limiter on this board, and I didn't want to add any more components, and the easiest way to limit the heat produced by the LED was to just cap the voltage, because the current going through the LED is kind of exponential. So at 28 volts it was like 4.5 watts of power, at 30 volts it was like 8 or 9 watts of power, and so like in order to keep the heat under control, because I only have this stinky little 40mm passive heatsink, I had to kind of keep the voltage down, but also I couldn't crank the voltage anyways because it would overheat my LCD. To control the backlight, I added in, I may in the future be able to tap into the board's own PWM circuit that was used to control the light for the backlight on the original display. I know where that is, I've got the components for it, but for this unit with the size, I decided to go with a external PWM board. So this has got a really nice positive like click to it, and that directly controls the backlight of the display. Then one of the principal advantages of this form factor over this one is how far away you can actually see through this sight. With this one, because of the small screen, as I said, the small mirror, sorry, as I said, you have to be right up close to see it. This one, the actual functional distance from which you can actually still see the whole display is about, like, from the back of this, probably a solid foot and a half. And of course, the closer you get, the more space you have around it, the more floating it is inside there. But it means you can put it out in the front of an LMG and have it in your shoulder and not be like trying to crank forward to fit into it. I will get some footage of this down it and how it operates. And the main reason for this much improved backlight is to cater for bright sunlight. As it turns out, I actually had a bad batch of mirrors. Or rather, I think what it was is that they had different reflectivity priorities. So I've got the two mirrors. I've got the one at the rear here and the one at the front. Between them, they need to reflect back enough light of the source in order to be able to see. And I think a couple of the sites I purchased that I pinched these lenses from were working with a more reflective rear mirror and a less reflective front. And something about, I think there's probably a specific wavelength that they're reflective to, that this is just being broad spectrum, all of an LCD light fired out of it. In order to, it just made them really dim to see in direct daylight. I came up with a temporary fix, which was to use solar film, the kind you put in windows for privacy and reducing the amount of heat and light that comes into a room. It gives basically the effect of a one-way mirror. And it's in fact what I'm using on the reflector of this to make my own partially reflective surface, because the site I got this mirror from only had one mirror, not the two, and so I have to, in order to have everything be at 90 degrees to each other, I have to have a reflector. I could place a display angled up towards it and then angle this display back to reflect it back to me, but you get a bit of you need to do some keystone correction for that. And you also then wouldn't be able to have as much space for this nice big beefy backlight. So keeping everything the same, I went with the same method and then produced my own semi-reflective glass. The downside of that is that this has got an anti-reflective coating on one side and a pro-reflective coating on the other. I can't economically find a good anti-reflective film. I fitted one on here and it helps a bit, but it's not great. I do get a bit of ghosting, a bit of double imaging on the bright elements of the screen, where you can kind of see a ghost of it, where it's not reflecting off the surface reflection, it's reflecting off the inside of the transparent side. But that's just kind of by the by at this point. So I'll show you a couple things on this site now. It's not quite finished. It still needs the button array, which is going on there, and this putting in, and a little bit of tidying up. I haven't put a bolt in the front yet, or a back cap on this, which I hope to make use of the quite useful power LED in here, so I'll be able to tell when it's properly off, because the power LED will glow. I'll make that visible from the outside, but it's more or less functionally and certainly in terms of features complete. So let me move the camera around and I will kind of try and get a position where you can see through this quite well. Okay, so here is the sight up close. You can see as it gets quite close, the focal point stays the same, so the camera can still focus on it even when I bring it right up close. You can see got a lot of movement and wiggle room in there. The parallax correction is, I wouldn't say perfect, but it's pretty good. It compensates a decent amount. As you move further away, you see less of the image, but you can still see I'm quite far away at this point. Solid like hand span from the lens, and you can still see all of the information on the display. With the original, which I will pick up now, you'll see you have to be really close in order to be able to see. So I'll bring this right up here. There you go. And one of the things you can see immediately, filming on here, that this original here is significantly more dim than the current one I'm working on. So that's why I've got the boosted backlight. So you can see I have to be right, I am legitimately touching the camera lens at this point in order to be able to show you this. But it works with your eye because you just kind of put yourself right up close to it. But the principal advantage of this larger sight is that I can be all the way out here and still see a very passable image. On the back here I've got a dial for the brightness, so I can turn it I can turn it off there. You can see the LED goes off, turn it back on. That's the dimmest. You could use this in darkness. I wouldn't say it's like going to work with pitch black or night vision goggles. There's quite bad light leakage around the frame here. I could improve that, but either way, you're not going to want to use this because it does actually project your image down range. So anyone looking at you with anything light amplification will immediately be able to see your gun. But that is just a kind of quirk of how my reflectivity works, and I feel like it's minor enough as to not worry about it. So yeah, I've got this dial here that will control the brightness. It goes all the way down to, that's a good serviceable dim. It's dimmer than the brightest on the other side, and it's more than usable in the dark. You could also manually adjust, there's a potentiometer on this main core here. If you need dimmer, you can turn the brightness down, the actual voltage down, and it will kind of shift all the brightness readings down. So then I can just dwiddle it up here like that, and then there's full brightness. You see it's nice and bright. You can see it easily against this display. Unfortunately, it is nighttime right now, and we're also in the UK in winter, which means even in the best scenario of midday, it's not going to be very bright outside, so I can't get any good demos at the moment. I will, if I have a sunny day, get some nice pictures of how this looks at the moment. The other key components of it, I'll just sit back down. What did I do with my driver? So now, instead of having to stick a long Allen key into here and adjust both of these at the same time in order to get the adjustments, I have split the sight adjustment into one hole down here for left right, which moves the base of the sight on a pivot, and then one here which moves the top of the sight in and out against the spring. So if I stick this in here, you should be able to see that the whole lens starts to pivot. There we go. Now I can screw it back the other way and go back out the other way. And that's pretty stable in there. It's not gonna move around too much. Like I'm not vouching for this being like real steel recoil and everything, but I don't think it's going to shake itself out of position. The top here is spring loaded, so it's not going to have any backlash in the system. It's a pin type, basically. It's holds it between two anchor points, and this kind of holds the thing in only when it's near the top. Like you kind of lever it in, and once it's in, it's like, because it can't pivot forwards or backwards because the lens is so thick that it would just kind of fall out. And then yeah, to adjust the elevation, you just screw this in or screw this out, and that changes the overall pitch of the mirror, which then moves the image up and down. And that's a definite improvement from what I had on this, because I have the large amount of space. But that does kind of slightly lead me onto a bit of a request for anyone who's watching this, for any recommendations for fairly inexpensive, and I'm talking like AliExpress specials at this point. I don't need originals, I'm talking repros. Any cheap repros you can get that would have a primary mirror size, so this size here, somewhere between these two. So this is about, I think, 25mm. Where's my calipers? No, sorry, 35mm width lens, and this one here is 75, I think. 73. So I mean, I'm looking for something around the 55-60mm width mark, because this is just kind of monstrous to put on anything other than a huge gun. But I want something bigger than this. I want something that looks more at home on a rifle. So I'm open to any suggestions anyone can come up with for a optic I can pillage the mirrors from, because going custom is really, really expensive for something of limited run like I'm doing here. And so that's what I'm hoping someone might know something that would fit the bill. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this. Bit of an update on what I've got here. I'm really planning to try and do a new kind of talk through showcase of the development work, and showing kind of the work I went through to produce these and how it works. I'm not going to release the CAD because it makes it a little too easy to duplicate, and yes, I know there's nothing complex about it. I'm happy to talk through the process I went through, but the CAD is what keeps me being able to produce these and make money from them, as opposed to anyone else. there's still a limitation of the firmware. I'm using Tachyon boards, but the firmware is owned and commissioned by me, and so you can't just make more firmware for you. But someone else with more software smarts could come in, produce the main board and display, and just kind of like rip off my optics, but rip off my zeroing system just by copying the CAD. And so I will not be releasing the CAD, but I am more than willing to answer any questions anyone has about this. I'm not trying to gatekeep this technology. I'm not trying to prevent people from being able to try and make their own. I want to produce these because I know most people aren't going to go through the 3 years, I'd say, I've probably been working on this or something like it. So I'm not going to like prevent people from being able to make them, but I'm not going to release the CAD so that somebody else can just print off what I have designed here. Yeah, pretty much it. So this is not going to be like, this is a bit of an unreasonable size. So I am looking for something a bit more kind of halfway housey that I can make my main stand-in sight, something that maybe is big enough to be able to allow me to have the bright backlight and the PWM control, but doesn't need to be so huge. And finally, a couple of plans in progress. I am looking into a wireless version of this. We have got a main board that should work for that, using the sound of the gun firing with a muffled microphone, so it should only pick up vibrations of the gun itself. Yes, you can false trigger it. Yes, it won't be as accurate, but you will still be able to plug in external sensors should you wish. I don't know why I'm holding that cable. That's a power cable. The external sensor cable is this one. You will still be able to plug in external sensors for more accuracy, or if you have a gun that you can easily hide the cables on, but for everyday kind of just slap it on a gun and it works, it should be more than accurate enough. We're aiming more than 90% accuracy, and I think we're way better than that already, just in the counting capabilities. That sight will have an internal battery pack, internal battery, and a charge circuit for it. Downside is I won't be able to use this boosted backlight because you're taking what is basically a net max 1 watt draw device and increasing that 5-6 fold to try and then run it off a 2000 milliamp hour 3.7 volt 5 volt or whatever little pack inside. You're not going to have a good day. But we could equally do versions of it where you then kind of insert something a bit like this, a stick LiPo into it. That is its own independent power source, and that then can be 11 volts and 1500 milliamp hour. That would last enough with this boosted backlight to get you through a game day, or maybe you need 2 of them for a game day or whatever. It's going to be quite hungry because it's going to be continual draw compared to a gun battery that might be. Don't actually know what the wattage of an airsoft gun is, but it's probably fairly high whilst it's drawing. But you don't tend to be that much sustained fire for it to kind of actually draw that much total energy from the battery. So yeah, if you are at all interested in this, I will put my link to my Discord down in the description. Jump on in there. I have previously been operating a kind of pre-order and I make them to order jobby because I was a broke student. I wouldn't have been able to produce these otherwise. And in fact, I actually have 5 of them basically just waiting on a bit more resin to go here. So this unit here and all of these ready to go. But I think what I'm going to do now going forwards, since I now am out of uni and working, is I'm going to order the parts on my own dime, make them, and then sell them afterwards. It makes the money feel a bit more rewarding because you're not trying to be like, oh, am I spending money that I haven't allocated yet? And it also means that you get them as soon as as you pay. Basically, I'll package them up and ship them out as soon as they are paid for, within reason, rather than waiting 3, 4, 5 months for me to get around to actually getting parts from China, printing them, having time to assemble them, and all the problems I might have. All those problems take place on my part. So that's what I'm going to be doing going forwards. I'm going to be clearing all the current orders, which this is a significant chunk. I think there might only be 2, maybe 3 orders left. I think only 2. This was actually one of the orders. As I said, someone wanted a larger form factor, so this was one of the orders. so I had to get that done as well. And so yeah, they'll be going up on the Discord for now. I will eventually get round to having a website that they can be ordered on, but I would again encourage you to join the Discord, because when I do have that, I will be putting stock notifications into the Discord and just saying, hey guys, stock's back up and ready. And I will be putting a bit more love into that. But also you can ask me any questions you want in there. Seriously, anything you want about how it works, the designs, the inspirations, how long I've been working on it, all the different design iterations. I've got photos going all the way back, and I will be using those to kind of do... Turns out there's also a time sleep as well. So it was both a combination of timing out and running out of memory. So again, it timed out. So yes, before I settled on using the tachyon, and I was just kind of like playing around with this. But yeah, I first started working on this probably about 3 years ago. Probably 4 years ago when I first started thinking, yes, I want to make this. I had no idea how I was going to do it at that point. I was working from scratch with my own mini Arduinos or Raspberry Pi Zeros, and I was picking it up from scratch. I hadn't done really any Arduino or Raspberry Pi actual kind of self-contained builds at all, and so probably for the best I didn't have to do any of that. And that's pretty much the key to why I've been able to get this out the door quickly, relatively speaking, from when I first had like product design to you can buy this. Yes, it's taken me time to fulfill the orders because I had a university course on at the same time. But the main thing was I didn't have to go through a bunch of software iterations and finding the right components for the board, because Reho, who on Discord, who is in my Discord server, he's the guy who designs the tachyon boards. He's a really helpful fellow. I commissioned a custom firmware from him, and he has been so helpful all through the development process, and a really understanding guy, and I really don't have enough thanks for him, because honestly it would not have been possible to get a product like this out to anyone without his help. And if you don't want the optic, or it's a bit too rich for all the development work I put into it, or you just don't like the idea of a futuristic optic or whatever on your gun, can't recommend his discrete round counters enough. They are the basis of all the technology in this, and they work really well. And they're a bit more kind of customizable. He's got different displays and everything. I just went for basic, just one thing in it. I do have customizable reticules, and I do still have the color customization, so everything in this can be changed color to how you want it. I kind of put everything on a nice bright blue, but now I've got this stupendously bright backlight. I don't need to maximize the amount of light coming through the display to be able to actually like see what's going on. So yeah, I'll put up a couple of photos of some of the development processes for this, because they're quite funny. I've got one of my favorite profile pictures, in fact it is my Discord profile picture, is me out testing the very first version of this sight that worked, like was actually airsoft gun attachable, did all the optics, and like worked at all. And that used the design based off of a Telrad's telescope, whereby you have the display, a 45-degree mirror, and then, actually I've got the lens here, this collimating lens above it. And because this lens has got like a 150mm focal length, the display had to be 150mm away from the lens in terms of internal volume. So I had this huge column, the height of the display, inside this sight, which was bright orange, just cause is what I had to print with. And that meant the sight was absolutely enormous. And I only had a tiny little sight picture because of that was the size of the aperture I had available, and moving it anywhere outside of there you couldn't see, and I had a little tiny beam splitter about the size of the display above it, and it functionally worked. It gave me compass, it allowed me to use my mid caps with 75 rounds and keep track of the ammo, but it was a truly ridiculous thing to have on your gun. And having gotten to this point of smallness, it feels slightly crazy to me to then be going back to something this enormous. But this is just so much more capable than anything else I've produced, and I felt like it deserved a bit of a kind of showcase of the changes that I put into this to improve on this, just as kind of the basis. Like, this won't be something that will appeal to really probably anybody. It's a really enormous unit, and it's not going to be cost efficient because all of these electronics are labor intensive and expensive and prone to failure, prone to me breaking them somehow when I'm installing them and setting them up. So I doubt this is going to be something that's going to be super price effective for anyone who wants to be able to order one. But well, hit me up if you want one. Like, honestly, I need to gauge if anyone's actually interested in a site this huge. But my aim is to try and create something a bit smaller, a bit more kind of bit not so as diddy as this, because again I've decided I'm going to try and fit this core in every site. So the height over rail you can see is a bit higher, and it's a bit longer. Not really if you get rid of the power development at the back here, but it is a bit longer. But this is going to become like an almost standardized core that I can then put any design of site around much more simply than the existing system. But yeah, so I am planning a whole development video, like a whole. I haven't got footage. I really ought to start trying to film my projects a bit more as I'm going through them. I tend to just work on them here and there everywhere, and then I get round to filming when I'm actually at like this level of something. I should turn that off. It's getting a bit warm. But I want to do that, but I do have like photos and dev videos and that all the way back to it through the process that I can kind of call upon some of that old footage and show my development process and explain things like the optics that are inside this system and how they work, because they are actually really simple, but they are necessary in order for this to actually work as an optic. And to be able to like actually look at your target and have both things focus at the same time. But yeah, that is a video that is planned. I've done some storyboarding for that and a bit of filming. I want to do some animations to kind of explain the process a little better as well. But I'm just really bad at actually sitting down and getting that stuff done. So instead, with this kind of being done-ish, you're getting a bit of a rant to camera instead. But please, if you are remotely interested in any of those videos, do give us a subscribe. I know the videos on this channel are really random. It's basically just been a dumping site for all of my videos. Anything I need to share, a lot of old game dev stuff, a lot of my university games dev stuff, and a lot of old game videos, but I'm trying to kind of build this up into something a bit more professional. I can't promise high quality. I can't promise timely videos, but I am planning to do something with this in that direction. Over time. So yes, that's the site broadly. Yeah, if you're interested, jump into the Discord, ask me any questions. I will do my best to answer, and thank you.